And I want, first of all, to thank my friend Dela Jara, who's one of the heads of the Balkan Insight, which is doing a great job, and also is the team from the Balkan Insight made this movie. And I want to thank her because she suggested it to me and she gave it to us for free, because otherwise you had to pay for that powerful documentary. We have titled this last section of our event tonight, Recalling the Past, Rethinking the Future. Both are very difficult. And I have the honor to have here in the panel discussion three young, wonderful scholars, Yeta Mulai, Mirela Mehmeti, and Angela Andrea. Yeta Mulai is a philosophy PhD candidate at DePaul University, and she's completing her dissertation on stability and capitalism. I'm looking forward to your conclusions. She has published work on feminism, Marxism, and political economy. She's the founder and executive director of Balkan Society for Theory and Practice based in Kosova. This society holds an international annual 2-week-long workshop in Pristina in topics such as nationalism, ethnicity, race, and decoloniality in the Balkans. Angela Andrea was born and raised in Greece. And actually, I have known her since she was a baby, until she migrated to the United States at the age of 13. She's now a pre-law student studying political science and philosophy at Loyola University, Chicago, and currently works with the American Bar Foundation and Northeastern Pritzker School of Law. She has conducted extensive research on the human rights abuses and international law violations during the genocide in Kosovo, and has dedicated her current honor thesis on the international treatment of Kosovo and Rwandan refugees. Mirela Mehmeti is a professor at College of DuPage. She's an instructor of ESL and Computer System Institute. She is a 15 years educator in Albania and Chicago area public schools. She grew up in Tirana, Albania, completed her degree in linguistics. She has a major in Albanian language and literature from Tirana University. She has a minor in ancient Latin. She has a master as a reading specialist from Concordia University. And she is also an English second language graduate studies degree. She has been a journalist in Radio Tirana during the Kosovo War, and her testimony will be really precious. And she has been for a long time host, producer, and director of Albanian TV in Chicago. So I want to welcome you warmly, and I want to thank you for accepting our invitation to be in the panel discussion today. So my first question is a simple one. What's your personal connection to Kosovo and to the Kosovo War? And I want to start from you, Yeta, because you come from Kosovo.
Right, yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah, good. Thank you, Gazi, for this event, and thank you, everyone, for being here. It's an absolute pleasure to discuss Kosovo and its independence with you all. So yeah, I grew up in Kosovo. I was 7 years old during the war, and I grew up in Peja, which is close to where all the atrocities that were discussed in the documentary took place. And I grew up there with my three sisters and my extended family. So my relationship to the war in the past is obviously a very complicated one. On the one hand, a very personal relationship to it, which is the things I remember and don't remember from what has happened. And now increasingly an academic relationship to it, which is trying to figure out why the events that happened. And an attempt to kind of move beyond just an understanding of the war as prejudice or ethnic hatred to actually figure out what are the historical causes for its emergence and why it developed the way it did. And I think the one thing I will say that is very important to me is, in terms of how to relate to the past, is how we understand what war really is and what definition of war we're operating with. Because I think one very kind of brutal and mundane way to understand war is to just as physical fight and violence or battle. And one concept that I think is very useful for me actually comes from the political philosopher Thomas Hobbes, who understands war not as actual battle, but as a tract of time, he says, during which the possibility of war can happen at any time. So what defines war is a condition of constant fear and instability of the possibility of violence. And I think that is a really useful definition of war, especially in relationship to Kosovo, because there's an attempt to kind of reduce what happened to Kosovo just with the dissolution of Yugoslavia. However, as many of us know, the complicated relationship between Serbia and Kosovo has a very long history, and one which is defined by a program for ethnic cleansing. And even if you look at the 30s, you see agreements being made with Turkey to displace over 40,000 and more Albanian Muslim families with the goal of ethnic cleansing. So this concept is very important for me, and kind of is a way in which I deal with the past, is understanding war not just as literal battle. And I think once we understand this, we can also look at the present in Kosovo as a present in which certain conditions of war have not been eradicated but remain there. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, you spoke about the platform of ethnic cleansing. You know, I'm a writer and I teach creative writing and I teach Balkan writers. And among the Balkan writers that I have taught was Ivo Andrić. And I didn't know until a few years ago when I read the memorandum of Ivo Andrić describing how Serbia and the Yugoslav state should ethnically cleanse the Albanians. I have never read something so violent, so vile, incredible. And I can say that I cannot teach that writer anymore. I have a moral problem with it. He's a Nobel Prize. I don't know how writers get Nobel Prizes when they write platforms how to kill people. Anyway, Mirela, you were during the Kosovo refugee crisis, as they call it, the international media. You were in Albania with the Kosovo refugees. So please bring us a little bit through your personal experience, that very painful, but I would say also a very proud moment for Albanians who, in the 20th century, it seems for the third time, after saving the Jews and after saving the Italian soldiers, they had to save their own brothers and sisters from Kosova, who became, because of the ethnic cleansing and genocide, became refugees.
Yeah, it's very important. It's interesting, exactly what you said. A couple of weeks ago, we saw the movie how we were able to help people in need, and it happened again. Yes, I was in Tirana. I was in Albania at the time, and I was working in Radio Tirana as a news reporter. In the same time, I was working as assistant principal in high school in Tirana as well. So I need to tell first that where was Albania at that time? situation. You have to think about that we just came out of almost 50 years of economy completely destroyed. And then it was a transition time, which was even worse because it was almost a civil war in Albania itself because the economy was so bad. There was no rules. I was a student in college initially, and I remember that many times we were in an auditorium similar to this one for lectures. And in the middle of the day, the doors were open and people with masks were kidnapping girls to sell them in the streets of Europe. So it was really bad. And 96, 97 was what was called the pyramid scheme, which ruined anything that was left. So Albania itself was in a very difficult situation, emotionally, financially, everything. At the same time, we were hearing what was happening in Kosovo. And of course, we were, as the citizens, we were aware of things that were happening. We did not expect that it was going to happen so fast. The things really changed rapidly. When I was working in Radio Tirana, in Channel 1, Radio Tirana, I think, still works with 3 channels. There used to be 3 channels. Channel 1 was the main one that everybody was listening. Channel 2 was just for summer, like entertaining. And Channel 3 was directly for diaspora, usually for Germany, England, Switzerland, not mostly in Albania. In morning programs, we used to prepare everything ourselves. Right now, if you see a show, it's one of those hosts in front of the camera, and there are maybe 20 producers in the back that make the show. We were used to do those ourselves, everything. Like we had to find the interviewers, we were preparing the interviews, we had to carry like some big recorders, like a radio I used to call. They were not working many times, and sometimes we were opening mics, we call them. Mics means that we were live, and we can open the phone calls to get interviews direct. Never recorded, we did not have the option that someone was calling for us to record and show it later. Why I say this? Because when things changed in Kosovo and we started having refugees, almost 4,000 refugees an hour. All the news reporters we were on the field to interview people that were coming from everywhere. And I remember that my mentor in radio, and which was my director as well, Jen Kuzma, very big name in Albania. He told us, we in the meeting, he said, everything stops. No programs, no interviews, everything stops. It's only about refugees. All the phone calls are going to be open 24 hours. We did not have 24 hours programs in the time. What does it mean? It means that we have to think about exactly like the movie. When families were leaving Kosovo, were coming in our borders, there was no cell phones in that time. And families were completely separated from each other. So some, maybe women with children were in Blaj, some were in Kokos, someone in Tirana, someone in Lucius, someone in Korç, and they had no way to communicate with each other. The way that they communicated was through Radio Tirana. So we opened all the numbers. Every single time someone was called, we had to air it right away. And that was the only way that they could say that I'm in Korça, for example. This is the name, please let our family know. In that time, Tirana created the refugee camp in Pool Park district, Peshina, that was completely closed, and that's what they created, the refugee camp. In one way, we were lucky that it was spring and summer, that the weather was warm. Otherwise, it would have been very hard to help. I remember that initially the plan was that for Tirana to be a transition place, because the refugee camps should have been in Italy and in Macedonia. So the refugees would come in Tirana, Honduras should have gone in Italy. Italy created some I'm not gonna say issues, but they say that Italy always is a place to open refugee camps in South or somewhere. Macedonia opened one camp and then closed the border. And there were lots of interviews in the time that we aired that so many Albanians from Macedonia wanted to go and help, and they were not allowed. So in that time, our prime minister at that time, Michael, came out on TV and said, all Albanians from Macedonia are going to stay in Albania. Italy or other countries can send their help to us. Where we are 5, we can stay 6. Where we are 7, we can eat 8. And at that time, we opened every single possible door that was open. We had so many people that were immigrated in Greece from Italy, so there many apartments were empty. And that's what we used to help everybody. I remember that like I said, we used to go to interview people. You have to think about those people that we just saw came in Albania, and we were trying to interview, but it was so hard. How can ask a woman that just lost five family members what happened? So many times we're just waiting if they're okay to talk to us, but we didn't ask questions many times. We just let them talk if they wanted to. But it was, one of the hardest parts to do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Actually, there is something that I have seen as a journalist also in Albania. Albania got out of 1997, as you said, totally a wreck. Not only economically, the society, the Albanians were fatally divided by the absurd civil war that took the lives of thousands of innocent Albanians. And with the Kosovo crisis, suddenly from the north to the south, the Albanians came together, left aside their political divisions, forgot about the civil war that had just happened in order to help their brothers and sisters. I don't know, but maybe the historians of the future would say that the Albanians of Albania should be very grateful to the Kosovars, because through their tragedy, maybe they saved Albanians from a fatal division. Now, Angela, you were born just 1 year before the war started. So I wonder what's your connection to the war, and how do you connect to it?
Thank you. Actually, that's a loaded question. At first I was very surprised that Kazi wanted me on his panel. I thought exactly the same thing. I've never been to Kosovo. My parents are from Lucian. And I never intersected, with Kosovo in a literal sense. But prior to Kosovo becoming my research subject, I intersected with it quite indirectly, and so have you, and so has everyone sitting here today. Because you have to keep in mind that what unfolded in Kosovo was not a single isolated act of violence. The way that I like to think of it was, it was an amalgamation of many things happening all at once, right? You have state-sponsored killings, you have misogyny, you have mass propaganda, you have toxic masculinity, and most importantly, you have nationalism. And in our current world, as we know it, I hardly doubt that every single one of you sitting here today has not intersected with at least one of those themes. Kosovo is simply inescapable in every sense, and it should be. So a theme that was relevant in my life that actually made me directly intersect with Kosovo was nationalism. And I'm sure you're quite educated on the matter of nationalism. You've written several books after it. But basically, I do not have to tell you what it is like to grow up in Greece as the daughter of Albanian immigrants. I can tell you, however, what I learned. And what I learned was that the combination of ignorance and nationalism had the power to do a lot of things. For one thing, it had the power to make people hide their identity from the bosses due to fear of getting fired. It had the power to stop children from playing together in playgrounds. And it had the power to incite literal violence against minorities. You know, it's interesting. Before Make America Great Again was printed on a hat, nationalism actually was never out of style. Another way that I have intersected with Kosovo was by studying it, quite closely actually, and understanding what it was that made, Milosevic's regime actually go out there and do what they did. And Dr. Brian Endless, a genocide expert and the man who is now supervising my thesis, not too long ago, he asked our class, why do we demonize murder? And, we all thought, it's a really stupid question. We demonize murder because it's a horrible thing to do. We demonize it because you're depriving someone's right to life. But actually, both of these answers are wrong. You see, we don't demonize murder because it's a horrible thing to do or because you're depriving someone of their right to life. We demonize murder because if you have the slightest bit of humanity in you, murder should be a very difficult task to carry through with. Digging up graves and burying those bodies or, doing everything that people under Milosevic did. If you have the slightest bit of conscience, death too should have been extremely difficult, very difficult task to do. From studying the effect of witnessing murder and war, witnessing what it has done to soldiers who suffer from PTSD, we understand what effects it can have on the human brain. But we also know that during the Holocaust, Nazi soldiers carried through with the Holocaust and actually went home and rocked their kids to sleep. And we know that the men who were involved in Death too did exactly the same thing. That at the end of the night, they went home to their families. So what I'm studying is what made that possible. And Kosovo was the extreme end of it, because it wasn't just nationalism. It was nationalism paired with the narrative of victimhood, which can be quite dangerous. What was responsible for a lot of it was also manipulating, demographics and population rates. You see, it's a great year to be talking about Kosovo. It's 2020, and Milosevic loved bringing up that by 2020, Serbs would become a minority in their own land, and that we should man up and stop it. And what a time to be here, 2020, Center of Albanian Studies. Now, the third way I have intersected with Kosovo, and I think the most valuable way, is through victims' stories. You see, I belong to the generation that learned about most of the war through people's stories. And a story that had profound impact on me was told to me last year by a very bright young man that I knew, who was actually one of the million victims who faced sexual violence in Kosovo. And actually, he couldn't tell a single soul for a very long time due to the societal circumstances and stigmas that generations before him had created. So by bringing this into your attention, I hope it becomes clear to all of you that genocidal violence, whether sexual or non-sexual, is the absolute epitome of power, or rather the abuse of power. And because of that, it does not discriminate between gender. While we teach our sons not to cry, that it's okay to cry actually, let's also teach them that, this is something that can happen to them as well, and that at the event that it does, they will still have a home to return to. And that is a conversation that we need to have. Sexual assault victims in Kosovo are just now starting to finally speak up. And as we think of what reparations we can grant them, we need to also keep in mind that this is a crime that affected males. It happened in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, it happened in Bosnia, it happened in many countries. It happened in Rwanda and it happened in Syria. And those accounts are just beginning to surface, and none of them differ. Kosovo certainly did not differ. And I think it's time that we have the conversation now and that this become a learning experience for all of us. So with that being said, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, because you are enriching the discussion from any angle, and you are connecting it also to larger issues that are not only, that don't pertain only to Kosovo, but to the larger community. Yet, I mean, when I see this kind of documentaries, I'm pretty troubled. And sometimes I cannot sleep at night. You know, as a scholar, as a writer, I travel a lot. And especially people who have not experienced this kind of experiences, they ask me, when are the Albanians and the Serbs going to reconcile? And they are somehow perplexed that I am perplexed toward this question. But really, where do we go from here?
Yeah, so I think one reason why that question is phrased the way it's phrased, and why for anyone who has experienced the war, it seems in a sense stupid, to put it bluntly. I think it has to do with the narrative of the Balkans overall. There's kind of been generally circling a narrative that the Balkans have always been in conflict with one another, that there's always been ethnic hatred, and it's because of who they are that they necessarily cannot coexist. And I think once you have this narrative about the Balkans, it seems impossible for them to do the work on their own. And then the question of reconciliation is always posed as an outside question. How does reconciliation happen? How do we get Kosovars and Serbs to listen to one another, to cooperate? And this is always a question from the outside, which I think is telling when it comes to, it says something about international politics, international relations, how we understand peace as something that is enforced from the outside. And it seems to me that it's both the Balkans and the nations within the Balkans and the international community that makes it impossible to have something like a reconciliation. And I think Kosovo is a good example of this. If you look at a place like Mitrovica, which is a divided city. And what makes it a divided city? It's not just that there is Serbians and Albanians, it's also that you have an international community that literally physically keeps it separate as a form of maintaining peace. So you have a standard, which is the standard that's generally used for conflict resolution is stability. So, and this is something that is very much informs foreign policy in the Balkans, that is before anything else happens, before you have political and economic development, what you need first and foremost is stability, to stabilize relations. So in Mitrovica, what is happening is that, right? You have a kind of a system, a military system that tries to stabilize the region. And by virtue of stabilizing the region, what it does is, in a sense, it blocks any kind of progress. Because the assumption is that, oh, if we leave, you're necessarily going to start another fight. And that's an incredibly racist and misinformed understanding of history. And one which kind of perpetuates what I was talking about earlier, conditions of war themselves. You cannot call Mitrovica a post-war city. It is necessarily a city still in war, so to speak. And what makes it still in war is precisely not just because you have two different ethnicities or nationalities operating together and living together, is because you have an international community that imposes a very particular understanding of reconciliation and peace. And in fact, if anyone has been to Mitrovica, you know that Serbs and Albanians communicate with one another way better than they do with the international community. I mean, you have a very successful, for lack of a better word, for example, black market there. So I think the reconciliation question is very much a Western imposition on the Balkan narrative.
Thank you very much. But thank you very much. On the other hand, I'm now, because thinking critically without the help of the international community, um, uh, Milosevic would have carried his genocide.
I agree, yeah.
And I don't know how Albanians and Serbs communicate in Mitrovica, but I've been only once to Mitrovica, to the Serbian side as a journalist. My name is Kazmenik, as you know, so a Serbian guy took me, and guards with the weapons came, and we were in the car, and the Serbian guy told me, don't tell them you are Albanian because they will kill us both. And that was the only time in my life that I told them that I had a name that I didn't have. I told them a Greek name because I was working for a Greek newspaper. And it was a surviving strategy. So I never went there because that was really terrifying to me. And I don't know, the most tragic thing was that they almost caught us on that bridge that is called the Bridge of Reconciliation. The Bridge of Reconciliation. We were about to be killed. So really, it's a very complicated situation. But Angela, if you have specialized in genocide, so genocides like dictatorships are like atomic bombs. They leave their legacy for generations. So how does a society going through genocide overcome it and find the courage to build itself and to build relationships with those who have carried genocide, please?
Thank you for your question. So one of the things that I specialize in is, the international courts that prosecuted the crimes in Yugoslavia and Rwanda. And if you take a close look at them, you notice that none of them are actually successful in fostering reconciliation. I mean, hey, if they could barely prosecute the people who were responsible for death too, I find it quite unlikely that they would suddenly make Serbs and Albanian Kosovars get along. So I think, the question mostly centers at who has the responsibility to do that. And, part of me certainly thinks that reconciliation is something that we can all practice in one way or another. Film directors have done a great job in actually showing what happened, what was part of death too. And a lot of them have a great way of humanizing victims and of actually showing their stories. And actually, one of the filmmakers that I'm talking about, he's from Serbia. He was 35 years old. And what was his name? Although I don't quite remember. Glavinic, that's right. So he made a documentary called Depth 2 and also a movie named The Load. And both of those movies technically showcase, the operation of Depth 2 and what entailed of it. And the artistic value of both of these movies has been beautiful. And I think it's important that it is viewed as an act of reconciliation. Because you have to remember that, in the code of silence that, ever so often has prevailed Serbia, there have been people that they've held the country accountable and they admit of what the generations before them have done. And whether these people are from Serbia or from some other country, I think that when we see an act of reconciliation such as that, we should always appreciate its artistic value and never deny it.
Yeah. Yes, please.
What made me really think was at the end of the movie, one of the accusers said, "What should I tell my son? If you," the accuser actually, yes. So, what should I tell my son? If you take the weapon to protect your country, you get 20 years. Yes, this is not true that everyone thinks that way. That's true. But the point, what I think is that we cannot force no one else to realize what happened and what's the responsibility. What we can do on our part is not to stop saying the story. in a very peaceful, but always not to give up and tell a story, to be present. Because by being us present, they have to accept it in one way or another, and the ones that have difficulty accepting. If we're silent, everyone is silent.
I totally agree. We have to tell these stories, and we have to keep these stories in mind, and we have to elaborate them, and that's what in our program we'll do in teaching and in our events. But now I want to share the floor, as we say, with the audience, and I want to thank you so much again for being here tonight. It's very difficult to give to everybody the microphone. So what the Americans do, and I learned in America, they go on the right or on the left and they wait online to speak. So in the line to speak. So if you want, whoever wants to speak, if you can go,
we can run from the chairs.
On that side, but it's very difficult to give the microphone to everybody. So
I can reach, I can let one. Please. All right, thank you. Okay, that's the Albanian way. Well, this is a very good part to educate the young, and I mean as we become older, and it's a very powerful documentary, and the value of this documentary is that we should appreciate what the Kosovars have done through history about preserving Albania and fighting for Albania from Isabelatini all the way till now, actually. I wonder if the movie was produced by, what was the movie produced? Was it Serb Productions or what was that?
this is a group of journalists. They are from all over the place, but especially from Bosnia, Serbia, and Kosova. So, but they are.
I mean, it was very good. Are these movies showing in Serbia?
Glavonic movie, for example, that too was showed in Serbia, and it was widely boycotted by the state, and that's why, and internationally it has disappeared almost, and that's why we thought that we have to support the movie and show it, but that will happen too.
And are these movies shown in Albania proper, in Albania, to educate the young that, what the Kosovars have gone through hundreds of years suffering to preserve that. It comes in their names. Also, Green, Barbona, they are so proud of putting Albanians' names. And it's important that we show this, because the only way we can reach reconciliation is by all Albanians getting educated, working hard, and having a place where they belong, their communities, to establish their reputation as educated people, like all the other nationalities have done. And this is a great country to be here, to have had that opportunity. And in 2004, when I was working as a psychiatrist part-time on Saturdays at Michigan immediate care, I saw the first Kosovar Albanians who came that were traumatized, and I did diagnose them with PTSD, and I did give them social security disability. That's how I got to know the 3 Albanian doctors from Kosovo who had come to Chicago, and one of them is working with me now. But yes, I had a lot of first-hand documenting in their psychiatric assessment their severe Serbian atrocities, to include from killings and rape.
Thank you. Mira duhet Albania stata Gazi. Një vrejtje kam vetëm në komunitet, që nga viti 2012 bëm një tranzicion dhe i bashku edhe tham të bëjmë Shqipërinë etnike. ajo Shqipëri natyrale. Edhe kishim shqiptar nga Kosova, kishim shqiptar nga Macedonia, nga Malizi, edhe we made a promise never to call Kosovar, Macedons, Malazes, for one, edhe Clintoni për thoshte fjalën Kosova, not Kosovo. Shqiptarën nga Kosova, unë me bujarin atë bëjnë një promise, se unë përherë thoshe Kosovari, mu pacientat më thoshin, ju Macedonës e tini pak më patriota se ne shqiptarë. Macedonës, ne luftë të madhe bëjnë në Macedoninë e shqiptarë.
Absolutely, and I know that Yeda is close to the current government, and she could tell us what the current government wants to do about that. But we have to really establish what we say the dialogue between us, because we are all Albanians, but we have had different experiences, and we should not be afraid of talking about these experiences. Because that's how we'll, first of all, understand each other before understanding the others. So that's why I said you should go there in line, because otherwise there is no way. Please, whoever wants to talk, please, can you come here? Please. Or even there, no problem. Just be there. I can see you, because otherwise there's no way. I'll start from the left, not because I'm a leftist, I'm liberal, but I'll start from the left.
On the right.
Oh, with the right of him, the left of me.
Good evening, everybody. The first thing I want to say is I'm a DePaul alumni, and I'm really, really happy for this initiative for the Albanian Studies program and you leading it. It's probably one of the best things that has happened to the Albanian community in Chicago and probably the US This is the best way to reach out to the US, to Americans, to non-Albanians, as well as the world, to get us, to know us better, to know our history, to know Kosovo's history and everything else. I wanted to touch a little bit on the theme of the reconciliation. You were asked when are Albanians and Serbians going to reconcile?
No, I'm asked by others.
Yes. And as Angela said, we should, welcome these, like that to other Serbian authors or filmmakers, doing these documentaries and exposing the crimes of Kosovo, the crimes that happened in Kosovo. But overall, my assessment of Serbian society as the Serbian state is they have not moved past the mentality of the Milosevic era. As many of you know, the Serbian president, which was a minister of information during the war, under Milosevic, recently said that the Račak massacre, which was another massacre more widely publicized, is a fiction. And his another Serbian official, Ivica Dačić, he was Milosevic's understudy. Albania should definitely be willing to reconcile, but we will reconcile once the Serbians are ready to come to us and reconcile. Once they're ready, the Serbian state, the Serbian society, Serbian culture, to accept the crimes of Kosovo. And then we should definitely be, welcoming to them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. You wanted to say something, Angela?
Yeah, I do. So I briefly want to respond to that. First of all, thank you for your statement. It was very well articulated. Now, I think everything that you said is completely undisputed. By no means has the Serbian state exhibited that it's been ready. In fact, as you watched, most of the higher chain of command that was responsible for Death 2, they were promoted to higher offices. And a lot of them came back to Serbia praised as heroes. So another thing to keep in mind is that I am not qualified to urge any Albanians to reconcile. I have not been through the war myself, and I'm not qualified to urge anyone, especially, my people, to make peace on themselves. My statement mainly relied on the fact that when there is effort, we should welcome it. Not that we ourselves should go to Serbia and tell them what we deserve, but that we should welcome it with open arms.
Yeah, I agree.
So again, thank you for your statement, and I think that also by doing this, we will create, a less hostile environment. But ultimately, yes, you're absolutely right. They should be ready to do that on themselves. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for being here, and I'm actually really excited to be here. I came here from Minnesota. So my question is regarding, I guess, reconciliation in a way. So I grew up in the U.S. with Albanian parents from Macedonia. And, you kind of grow up and you have a lot of this pride and you want to celebrate who your people are and everything. But the one thing I noticed is that there's a lot of, anger as well anytime we go back home to Macedonia. Even though, we have Albanian people in the city of Kosova, there's still other minority groups. And something we don't realize that we do is we do the same thing to the Roma minority that currently exists there as well. So one thing I would like to know, kind of a take from each of you, is basically how can we, as the generation who grew up in the U.S. and other educated Albanians throughout Eastern Europe or other parts of Europe, or I guess the world, what can we do to make this situation a little bit better? Because I can understand for older generations, it is hard to reconcile with the fact of dealing with your trauma, especially in a culture that doesn't really talk about dealing with trauma, but then wanting to raise your kids to have Albanian pride. But sometimes I feel like that's also not necessarily done in the best way possible because we form our own ideas of nationalism, and that tends to separate us from other groups in the countries that we move to. So what can we do anytime we go back home, or if we want to create other programs to basically make the situation better for up and coming generations?
Thank you very much. May I very briefly answer? These are amazing topics that we have to ask ourselves. But at the end of the day, studying nationalism, I know Albanians have inflicted humiliated wounds on themselves, like the period of Enver Hoxha, but I don't think that there are many nations, especially the Balkans, who can sleep calmly at night like Albanians, that they have not done so much harm to others.
I don't agree with that.
Yeah, that's my take. This being said, it doesn't mean that we should lie on this and we should not examine ourselves, also being aware of the excesses of any kind of nationalism and pride.
Yeah, we have to be careful with that term nationalism. Nationalism is different from pride. Like if you are proud to be Albanian, it's different. Nationalism is a little extreme. And nationalism is to give yourself right in the name of your ethnicity or region to feel like you're better. On the other side, even with what Luan said earlier, also you, that unfortunately for our history has been quite difficult for us and separated us for years and years and years. And yes, we are in different regions. Yes, we are all Albanians. Unfortunately, many times we do see things that we grew up differently. And I can tell you exactly at the same time when refugees came from Kosovo and Albania, we did see that. When we were going to interview people, there were questions that were given to to us that we were like, oh, what this question came from. So we grew up in for 50 years or more separated. That does have an effect. So the pride is being interpreted, I think, in a different way. Now, I do get the point you mentioned something about other ethnicities and other groups that might be in different regions. If we are talking about as individuals, and I'm talking about like small groups, absolutely. We're not, I mean, we're human, all human. We are not better than everybody else. Those are human feelings. As a cult, as a nationality, as a nation, unfortunately, we have been more on the other end, like we've been attacked more than we felt. But I do see the point that you're talking about.
Please, because I want everybody to have a chance.
Brava, jam qëndresa dhe jam kosovare, fillimisht ju përgëzoj për dokumentarin, ishte për mua personalisht shumë emocionuese për ta parë, por gjithsesi diçka që më pëlqej është se kur flasim për këtë reconciliation, është diçka shumë reale kur ne si kosovarë tregojmë historinë se çka na ka ndodhur neve, por është një plus shumë i madh kur kemi palën tjetër që e pranon të vërtetën, dhe kjo zgjon një shpresë tjetër për të pranuar ajo se çka ka ndodhur. Çka më la përshtypje për folsën në mes është se kur thatë gjatë kohës që refugjatët vinin në Shqipëri, ju thatë se nëse të kam kuptuar mirë që shqiptarët, refugjatët do ishën vetëm në transition. Dhe më la shumë përshtypje përse nuk ishte Shqipëria ajo që do thoshte ne do i presim, a ishte pjesa ekonomike apo ishte politika dhe shqiptar unë atëherë kam qenë ka 30 vjeçare, por sot la përshtypje ajo që ne në shtetin do të ishim vetëm në transition dhe jo timi aty.
That's a great question. That was not the plan of Albania, that was the NATO plan. So NATO created the basis, like if something happens somewhere, they do have countries that they do to assign who's going to be responsible because they have they can afford, they have everything ready. And Italy was one of those that they did have the refugee camps ready already done, and Macedonia was the same. That was completely NATO, that was not Albania. Also, NATO army came in Tirana. Tirana was designed to be the headquarters of NATO before they were moving to Kosovo. So in our port of Tirana, Mother Teresa airport now, that was completely changed to use by NATO army. Actually, my sister used to work immediately with the American army. And they were created exactly like an army, like there's not airport anymore. They created trenches and everything because they did not know what's going to happen. In the same time, air space and water space of Albania was completely blocked because we're going to use by NATO for air flights to Serbia. So there's no transportation. So it was kind of risky in that direction. So again, that was NATO plan, not Albania. When Albania saw that Italy kind of hesitated, then reacted immediately, said, we don't care what NATO decides, Albanians are going to stay here. If you can help us, we appreciate that, but they're going to stay here.
Thank you.
Hi. Thank you very much for your time. And like the other gentleman said, I also went to DePaul and graduated from here, and very proud to have you running this program here. A couple of thoughts. The Albanian question. It's not so simple. Like, it seems to be presented in a very simple manner here. It doesn't just start from the Kosovo War. We're going back generations. We're going back at least 500, maybe 1,000 years of complicated issues in the Balkans. So these things just continue, like a powder keg, continue to come back up. And Kosovo is just the most recent. I was very honored and proud to be able to help support as the Albanian diaspora here in my early 20s, mid-20s, when the war broke out, and to be able to actually be in Washington, D.C. With the lobby when they started to bomb. The first day of bombing, and I was in Washington, D.C. with a large group of Americans from Chicago. That said, this issue is more than just, we have a lot to consider. We have our own national identity to consider. We weren't a state until 1912. We didn't really know who we were until 1912. That's very recent in the overall scheme of a national identity. Number two, as much as reconciliation is a wonderful idea, and we should reconcile, and maybe we'll have it, but probably realistically, to be realistic on this subject, it won't. Time heals all wounds is an old saying. So what's really going to happen is we need to think towards the future and economically. I think if you have a stable economy where everyone is prospering, these issues, they just kind of sort of go away. So, I mean, maybe you think I'm wrong, but I think this is something that's realistic, especially in the Balkans, because it's always been, perhaps, I don't know the numbers for this, but I know Albania is probably the poorest country in Europe, and second poorest is probably Kosovo. So we've always been a little stepped on, and these are just realities that we have to face and understand. And it's not so simple as like, this is the reason, and this is what happened, and I get it. We have to look at everything, but it's super multi-layered. It's not that easy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm so happy that different perspectives are brought up, which are brought in, which we want really to develop them. Everybody's thoughts here are so precious. And it shows also that there are no simplistic solutions. I'm so intrigued by what you said. Until 1912, we didn't know what we are. And there is this ongoing discussion that Albanian identity is still a work in progress. And that's why we should be careful of the pitfalls on the road. But economically, what is going to happen? Do you believe that Kosovo? I am against that happy narrative that, especially in America, exists, that you can make a state happy, thriving in just 5 years, like you build a casino in Las Vegas, while you carry with you problems, wounds, complexities of centuries. And we have seen some of this. So,
yeah, I think it's the reason why I was talking earlier about stability is that it's not surprising that Kosovo is stagnating economically. And you see that it is, on the one hand, it appears like it's not a priority. On the other hand, there's a lot of economic decisions that are being made that do not affect the people that are living in Kosovo immediately. One of them is privatization. For some people, that's a beautiful thing. For a lot of people who live in Kosovo, it's a really devastating thing. You have a country that's economically very poor, like in a way, like selling their resources immediately, and the only people that have the benefits of those sellings and privatization are not the people who live in Kosovo. So a part of this reconciliation project is that precisely because Kosovo is the youngest city, the youngest country in Europe, that it can actually, the demands that are being made on it are demands that are not made on other countries. For example, questions of corruption and questions of even civil rights, like gay rights, etc. The demands are made in Kosovo are not made on any other country. And so here, not to sound totally paranoid, but you have to figure out why it is that these demands are exclusively on Kosovo and who is reaping the benefits of the fact that Kosovo remains a country forever in transition. So I think economically it is developing on the one hand, but it's developing on forms that are not, there are very much brutal capitalist measures that I think are never at the benefit of the people that live there, but tend to benefit international private investors a lot. Yeah.
I understand that you have studied Marxism very deeply.
In connection with this, can I intervene for a second on that?
Of course.
And then fine. Vetëm një intervenim. Pajtohem me kolegun plotësisht I cili thotë se ekonomia dhe zhvillimi e bën të vetën. pjesë e pajtimit franco-gjerman është zhvillimi, ekonomia, kësaj I shtohet vetëm the state of law. There's no state in the Balkan that function. So that's why, philosophically, I'm sorry, you can talk all night here, we cannot solve the problem.
I'm sure.
State of law, economic development, that is, if French and Germans are kissing each other instead of killing each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would say that the theater brings also a very crucial point, that of imposition to Kosovo, one economic model from outside, without even asking the people of Kosovo if that model always works. So I understand. French and Germans, yes, they reconciled, but they got a lot of money from the Marshall Plan. And that's why the Europeans don't understand.
They don't have the Balkan
That
mentality.
we need also, as Joe Cocker's song says, a little help from our friends, and we need it now.
My name is Volnet Dervishi. I'm Albanian from Macedonia, so did one. I always say that because it's no way when someone else in the United States asks you where you're from to answer that I'm from Macedonia, because immediately they will understand or they will assume that by nationality you're Macedonian. It always bothered me the same thing when people called us Macedonians, and they still do that. However, we are getting better. We're getting better there, getting better in Albania as well. I want to join everyone to congratulate Mr. Kaplani for leading this program. It's a long time overdue. We have been organized under the community since probably the first group of Albanians came in the United States or anywhere else abroad. We have been organized in the small local organizations as well. And the theme, the idea is to try to cultivate our culture, our tradition, especially to the younger generation, as much as we can. And of course, to create possibilities for them networking with each other. However, having a program, educated program, I guess, I should say, that explains in this way, I think it's a much better way of bringing the youth together to not only support this program, but to continue and be proud of who they are. I thank you for bringing this kind of panelists, actually, explaining the war in a different way. Since for most of us, the war is black and white, either me or you. I'm actually saying better me than you. And in Kosovo, it's pretty clear to us why the war happened. And for that, I'm going to have one question actually for panelists. I'm going to use this time to do that. There is a saying, you have one killing, one person dead, 2 people, 3 people, it's a big tragedy. But then once you have thousands, tens of thousands of people, it becomes just a number. And then as we see and watch the TVs, we see a word somewhere, we look at another 10,000 people are dead, swipe next channel, nobody understands. For us, maybe we were a little bit luckier in Kosovo. Unlike in Bosnia, that hundreds of thousands of people were dead. In Kosovo, I think that it said in the movie it was about 12,000, but I think the number is much bigger. I think it's over 20,000 with the people that are still missing. Then we have the rapings, we have all other kinds of atrocities. Even that number is much bigger. What's the reason for the panelists? The notion that we feel tragedy for a single number, and then when it becomes a much huger number, it's just a number then. And it takes so much time for the world to initiate something and help the war zones. Thank you.
We should give
thinking who wants to, now, we are,
Então, iniciarei o discurso na tentativa de conceder de os testes. Kosovar, Shqiptarët në Maqedoni, Shqiptarë Shqipëri, Kosovar, Albanians, no, it's not different. Janë një, do mënje të Shqiptarë, ne trojtë e vetë një. Të shoj, ato që të angjera në konceptet e saj shpjegimeve, të kemi vetëm një kujdes. Pajtimi mes Shqiptarëve dhe Serbëve. Do të shqiptuar pak e historikisht. Që nga viti 1884 dhe në vitin 1999, kjo periudhë historike, është luftë e serbëve dhe kishës ortodokse serbëve kundër shqiptarëve ballkan. Një, e dyta, nuk mund të kemi pajtim me serbët, pastaj se do të nisë një koncept akriçak të ri. Serbia për të 200 vjet e fundit, ne Kosovë kanë interesuar vetëm një çështje, pasuritë e Kosovës. Serbisë nuk i kanë interesuar as kryqi, as kisha. Te ka thënë akademik Markastiç. Konceptet e zhvillimit të Kosovës dhe pajtimit që unë pajtohem me këtë panelit që ata pasën dhe nivelet që ata vetë përpoqate, kjo është një problem i veçantë që mund të bisedohet në atë dia. Ndonse profesori Ilazi përmend një rrugove. Shtrohet pyetja pse rrugova në fund ufton nga Tirana së parë. Për shkak problemeve që koncepti politik të zyrtarëve në Tiranë dhe në Prishtinë dhe koncepti rrugovës për pavarësinë e Kosovës ishte edhe sot është realitet, që ne konceptin e këtij filozofik e kemi sot edhe në kushtetutën e Kosovës, e kemi në konceptet e gjithë shqiptarëve. Është rrugë e cila nuk ka kthim brapa, është realizuar i ëndra e gjitha pyetjet. Në konceptin ndonse mos ka vetë përmendi. Unë jam edhe protagonist që kam pa tragjedinë e Kosovës. Unë jam ai që kam qenë edhe për të luftës, gazetës Fuati tonë, dhe në këtë duart mia kam varros tragedinë që ka ndodhur në Oprin Ternisës, kur me durët e mia e kam varros diturinë Termushe. Jam protagonist i këtij asaj që ka ndodhur në Kosovë, me sytë e mia dhe kronisht i kësaj pune, dhe kam përjetuar që është më keqja fatin e 250.000 njerëzve që Serbia ka qenë nga puna. Unë kam takuar plot profesor interpretant Prishtinë që kishin kurs të shtypur, por idealin e kishin periudhën e Kosovës. Edhe një mos që nga vitin 1912, Andrej, deri në vitin 1999, që u shpërbën Jugosllavia. Jugosllavia e shpërbën ata që formuan vetë 1918, serbët, kroatët dhe slovenët. Ne kemi qenë kartë e rezervë e Jaltës dhe të fuqive të mëdha, Rusisë, edhe të ndryshturke që shkojnë në vitin 1912 me zimrimin e Stamboll dhe fatë tjera të regjimit të Jugosllavit të tjera. Por është një fakt mos harroni. Shqiptarët e Kosovës në Jugosllavi, asnjëherë Jugosllavinë dhe Serbinë nuk e kanë konsideruar si shtet vetë. Ne gjithmonë e kemi konsideruar Shqipërinë e tij. Raporti që kërkoi Merela për refugjatët, dhe raporti ndaj Kosovës është një temë të cilën ndoshta duhet të kohë. Më gjatë bisedojmë për këtë çështje, edhe se mos ka ta djemt që shkuan në Armatosën, u kthyn në Kosovë, unë jam edhe gjithashtu ka përcjellë këtë çështje nga afër, por djemt e Kosovës shkonin me 200 marka në xhep, e blenin një fushë në Tiranë dhe ktheshin për me tek lirinë e Kosovës. Koncepti i lirisë së Kosovës dhe kjo që tash është bërë realitet, Kosova shteti i pavarur, është fakti i pakthyeshëm një, edhe dyta pajtim me Serbinë në as mund kemi, se ka të këtyre disa zera që kanë dalë në Beograd për çështje ndryshme, jo do të pajtu. Nuk ka pajtim përderisa Serbia nuk e ka falje publike ndërkombëtare për krimet që ka bërë që pa fare.
Thank you very much. I think that we have overstretched and we have heard wonderful interventions, and I want to thank you, everybody, for your contribution. And I would say that we should call it a day. Thank you very much.